Hello, good morning, everyone. So good to connect with you again on this fine Sunday. So I hope everyone has plans for today. So, as per usual, if you're receiving this live stream, can you do me a favor and type a one in the comment box? So that just confirms for me that the audio and the visuals are going out smoothly. All right, so again, this is another installment of the series, which I've called the Digital Marketing Playbook for Vision and Hearing Care Practices. So this week, we're going to talk about why cheap website hosting is costing your practice. So what we're going to learn today is what do we mean by cheap hosting? So let's define the term. We're going to look at why cheap hosting harms your business. Thanks, Ewan. Thanks for confirming that you're getting this. So we're going to look at why cheap hosting harms your business, and I'll also talk about what to look for in a hosting provider. So a couple of weeks ago, I talked about how you go about choosing a platform for your practice website, and I said that there are a few options, but there's kind of like a binary choice, if you like, between open source and closed source systems. Now, if it's a closed or proprietary system, some of the stuff, probably most of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, maybe isn't so relevant to you because a lot of that stuff is sort of managed and you can't really change much of it anyway. If, however, you have a WordPress website, which is probably the majority, I think, of business owners, especially small business owners, then this stuff will apply to you. So with WordPress, it's an open source piece of software. Essentially, it's free, but you do have to provide a hosting environment. I mean, that website has to live somewhere, and that's what you pay for, right? So everything I'm going to cover today is especially relevant if you're in that circumstance. So again, let me start off with a bold assumption here. I'm assuming that you're here because you are the owner or the manager or planning to become the owner or manager of an optometry practice, an audiology practice, an ophthalmology practice. So basically you're in vision care or hearing care. And I'm also assuming that you're watching this because you're actually interested in growing such a practice, whether that be, now or in the future. And just to give you a heads up that if anything that I talk about today strikes your interest, then you can reach out to me for a one-on-one Zoom call, no obligation. So my agency's website is opticsdigital.net. And who am I? Well, my name is Paul Salloway. So I've been working in digital marketing and website consulting for almost 20 years now. And in 2022, I started this agency, Optics Digital Marketing, with the goal of working with Australian and New Zealand optometrists originally, but since then we've expanded to also include some related verticals like ophthalmology, audiology, and so on. All right. So what do we mean by cheap web hosting? So if you do a search online for web hosting, you'll see like a variety of price points. I think in this business you generally get what you pay for. I think anything under, let's say, $25 a month is probably in the category of what I would call cheap hosting. I've seen some hosting plans as low as like $5 a month. And I would definitely be cautious about those. Like I said, generally you get what you pay for. Now, the problem with a lot of these cheap hosting packages is, okay, so typically your website sits on a server. So that server is a physical machine. It's in a data center somewhere. And the owners of the the vendors of these hosting services, a lot of times they will try to cram as many accounts, as many websites as they can onto that one machine, because it's a fixed cost for them, and they're trying to maximize revenue. So what sometimes happens is that the resources on that physical machine get stretched. So you end up running out of things like space, memory, actual processing capacity, even something called inodes, which is like actual physical units of like how many files you've got. That's another thing a lot of people, maybe unaware of, that does have some constraints around it. So this is why overcrowded servers are a problem. Now there's something called cloud hosting. That's typically, you typically pay more for that. So in that case, you maybe don't have some of the constraints, because with cloud hosting, those sort of limits are a bit more flexible. So often the case with cheap web hosting plans, you'll get slow support or no support. So it could mean, like, if you've got a problem, then you go to their support page and it'll be like an automated chat bot. You'll end up talking with an AI bot trying to troubleshoot, which is, your mileage is going to vary with that. Or you leave a support ticket and it might be 24 hours before somebody gets back to you, particularly if it's an overseas vendor and you're in Australia. So that's problematic. Routine maintenance. So particularly if you've got a WordPress website, which I think probably most of you do have, that site has to be maintained, has to be updated. There are software updates coming out all the time. It's a bit like owning a car. You've got to do routine maintenance on your car. Well, no different with owning a website, an open source website like WordPress. So there are plugins that have to be updated. There's the core software itself that needs to be updated routinely. If you don't do that maintenance, then you're opening yourself up to vulnerabilities and potentially a site crashing, that sort of thing. With most hosting plans, I think even the more premium ones, at best, they might put in place an automatic update, which means that when a new software version is out, they just update it for you automatically. Most of the time, that's probably going to be fine, but there are always these like edge cases where there's some incompatibility, and especially with a cheap hosting plan, if you report that, they're likely to say, well, that's out of our scope. You have to find somebody to fix that yourself. So that's not good. So website edits, you're on your own pretty much. Well, if you've got a cheap hosting plan, then they definitely won't be doing that for you. So anytime you like maybe change your staff, like most practices have an about us page. Anytime like you have a staff member leave, you get somebody in new, you probably want to update that. If you've got your business hours on your website, and you should, if those change for any reason, you're gonna have to update those. So all these little edits are gonna be your responsibility. So something to keep in mind is that a lot of hosting plans, they will start off with what we call a teaser pricing. So they might start off at, say, $5 a month, but then after 12 months, for example, it'll ramp up to the real price, which could be $20 or more. So you got to look into the fine print. I'm kind of surprised sometimes when people complain about this, though, and I see it all the time. People complain, oh, our hosting company jacked up the price from $5 to $20 a month. And if you look at the pricing page, it's quite obvious that that's what you're signing up for, right? So just be aware of that. So security. So the internet's it's the Wild West out there. There are always bad actors with nefarious intent. So that could range from like actually hijacking your site and ransoming it, which has happened, not to me, of course, but I've heard of it happening. Um, but it could include things like you know getting malware injected into your site, um, spam, like people try to inject backlinks to their own site. They do that through malware again. Um, I've even heard of some of these viruses installing cryptocurrency mining software, which you get through your browser if you don't have proper antivirus in place. Really sketchy stuff. So, and that's going to really negatively impact your business. So it's important that whoever is doing your hosting has some level of security in place. And that at least should be a firewall, but also have some sort of routine virus scanning as well. Backups, right? So any hosting company worth their salt should be doing a routine backup on your website, but that could vary. That could be either a weekly backup or a daily backup. And if it's a daily backup, even they might keep a limited number of backups. So and that could be a problem as well. So if your site, let's say, got infected, worst case scenario, and you think it happened like 2 weeks ago, if your hosting company doesn't have backups that go back that far, well, now you've got a problem, because one of the remedies would be to go back and restore the site before the security breach happened. So you need to really look into like how often does your hosting company do a backup? How many versions do they keep? Sometimes I've seen on cheap plans as well where they'll do backups, but you've got to pay a fee in order to restore any of those backups. So, which I think is problematic sometimes. And another thing too is that I don't believe it's a good idea to have one source of failure. So if your only backup is your hosting company and something has gone wrong with their backup process, and that has happened, again, not to me, but I've heard and read about these happening, then basically you're left out in the lurch. So I always recommend to clients that you have redundant backups. So what we do in my agency is we have a hosting platform backup, and those backups are done daily. But we also do a weekly backup to Dropbox. Okay, so and those weekly backups, we typically keep about 6 months worth of backups there. And there might be, on top of that, there might be some additional backups that we do as well, sort of like one-off things. So you can never have too many backups. That's my rule of thumb. So does any of this make sense? Do you agree with any of the comments I've made so far? If you do, could you drop a number 2 in the comments, please? All right. So why does any of this matter? Well, I'm going to explain a few of the ways that cheap web hosting can harm your business. So one, and maybe the most obvious one, is that slow pages will lose visitors. So people are famously impatient when it comes to waiting for their web pages to load, and this is particularly the case for people who are on mobile devices like smartphones and so on. So what a lot of research has shown is that if people have to wait more than 3 seconds for a site to load, then a large percentage of those people are going to abandon the page. So you really don't want to keep people waiting for their web pages to load. It's just a bad experience, and that can impact on your brand and your business in a lot of ways. So one way is Google penalizes slow sites. So page loading speed is a factor in their algorithm, their ranking algorithm. So they would prefer to rank sites higher that have fast loading speed rather than slow pages. Like, Google's in the business of sending people to pages where they're going to have a good experience, where they're going to find the information that they're looking for, but also, a good user experience in every sense of the word. So fast loading pages are a part of what they're looking for. So another is, the last few years, we've all become familiar with AI and large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, even Gemini, Perplexity, Grok, and so on. So most of these platforms have a model called RAG, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So they often start with a set of training data, but depending on your question, they may want to augment that training data by going out real time, searching the web for the latest information. So, they're working on a time clock as well. If you've given like ChatGPT or Claude a query, so those platforms want to get the information, retrieve that information as quickly as they can to give you the answer. So these large language models also are going to penalize sites that are slow loading, which means that they maybe are ignoring your website and recommending your competitors rather than you. Okay, that's not something that you want. Another way that cheap web hosting can harm your brand is if you've got a site that's just broken. If you've got like something on your page, you see this a lot. So where maybe somebody has installed a plugin or a piece of code, and for whatever reason that isn't working anymore. So you get like a bunch of gibberish, like a bunch of code that actually appears on the page. So that's a bad look. Even things like, maybe like the SSL certificate. You can probably see in your browser window there's a little like padlock up in the beginning of the URL. So that padlock means that the connection to your site is secure. So that's what they call it, a secure socket layer SSL certificate. So if that has expired, for example, then you're going to get your browser give you a scary warning message that this website is not secure. So, if it's me, I just abandon those completely. I don't want to interact with any site that's unsecured. So if the site's got errors on it, if it's down, like if it's just completely not loading, all of these can erode trust in your practice, in your business, in your brand. Another way that cheap hosting harms you is through the fact that it's a drain on your time. You're all busy. You've got your practices to run. You've got patients to serve, so you really shouldn't be spending your time fixing technical things. And even just those simple updates, like changing your About Us page, changing your business hours, like all of those tiny little tweaks. I think that it's probably a poor use of your time if you're going in and doing those things yourself. So this is where I think it pays to have someone that you can hand this off to, and just say, look, let me, like in our case, so we support clients through hosting and site care plans. And if they've got a change like that, then the client might just send us an email and say, hey, I've got a new employee, a new optical dispenser. So she's going to shoot you an email with her photo and some details about her profile. Can you update our website for us? And that's it. We take care of the rest. So I think if you're hoping to scale your business, and you should be if you're here, then these are the sorts of systems that I think you should consider putting in place to protect your valuable time. So another way that cheap hosting can harm you is through security exploits. So I've talked about how it's important to have firewalls and virus scanning in place. So a hacked website can really cause damage. It damages patient trust, and can also damage you in your Google rankings. So so if Google becomes aware that a site has some sort of security vulnerabilities, then they may drop it from drop it from their first page list of results that you've worked hard to get into. And in addition to that, if you're running Google ads, if that's part of your marketing strategy, and in a lot of cases for a lot of you out there will be, Google ads will pause. It's part of their policy that Google ads will stop if they detect that a landing page has some kind of security vulnerability in it. Okay, they don't want to send people to unsecure pages either. And even aside from that, aside from security vulnerabilities, if the page is just slow, then that's going to impact also on your Google Ads campaign through something called a quality score. So if the page is slow, then it reduces this quality score. So the way Google Ads works is every campaign that you run, Google will look at the page, actual landing page that you're sending people to, and it will determine if you're providing a good experience with that page or not. Does the page, for example, content match what you were talking about in your ad? So that's one part of the quality score. But they'll also look at how fast does that page load. So if people are delayed, more than 3 seconds when they get to the page, that's not a good user experience. Google doesn't want that. So they're going to make you pay more to get those clicks. So your cost per click is likely to go up if you have slow loading pages. If you can get your pages to load faster, that's one way to get your cost per click down, and therefore more value for money out of your marketing budget. So does that make sense? If you're with me so far, then can you drop a 3 into the comments if you agree with any of the points that I've made so far? All right. So what should you be looking for in a hosting provider? Well, I think that the reality is that most hosting plans fall short on their own. I think a hosting platform or a hosting package is going to create an environment for your website, but I think a lot of the things that in reality that you need aren't typically provided by a hosting company. Typically, the sort of thing that you need to find a partner, an agency partner to deal with. So that would be things like routine software maintenance, things like periodic tweaks to your website. So I think that what you really want is a hosting plus site care plan, and that's something that my agency does. With our marketing clients, it's something that we just need to fix often before we do anything more advanced than that. So what you should be looking for, I believe, is a vendor who takes full responsibility for routine maintenance and updates, Reliable, regular backups, like I've explained, ongoing security, virus scanning. So with our packages, we do daily virus scans. Haven't had any incidents so far. Minor site edits on your behalf, like I said, if you've got something that you just need, something simple that just needs updating on your site, you shouldn't be getting your hands dirty with that. I think you should be able to delegate that kind of stuff to somebody who's competent to do it for you. So what you should look for in a hosting plan or hosting and site care plan is a hosting environment that's built for speed. So just to get into the weeds a little bit, so some of the ways that could happen are by having adequate server resources. Like I said, you don't want to be one of 100 sites crammed into a physical server. So your server environment should have enough storage, enough memory processing capacity, enough inodes, all that sort of thing. Another way is something called caching or caching, depending on your preferred pronunciation. So I'll explain what that means. So to give you an analogy, so imagine you go to a bakery and you want to get a meat pie, right? So if the baker has to go and make the dough and make the mince and all that for you after you've ordered it, you're waiting around to get the thing that you asked for. On the other hand, if they've already got a pie ready to give you, it's a quick and easy procedure. Everyone's buying the same product, everyone's getting the same pie, right? That's kind of like, that's how caching works. So with a caching technology in place, let's say, for example, your homepage, everyone should be seeing the same thing. The homepage is the same. So with caching technology in place, your server should have that sort of pre-made and ready to deliver for whoever wants it. So there's less waiting time involved. Another technique or another technology that's used to speed up websites is something called a content delivery network, or a CDN. So give you another analogy, a different analogy. So let's say you're planning a party, right? So in order for your party, you need drinks, food, what have you. So if you've got to get those from a supermarket, but let's say you can only carry so much at a given time. So that means you go there, come back, go there, come back, go there, come back, right? That takes time. Or you could say get 3 mates, send each of those off to different supermarkets, get the drinks, the food, what have you, and then come back individually. That's kind of how CDN works. So with a content delivery network, rather than having all of the resources that your web page needs to load in the browser, rather than having those all located in one place, with a CDN, you've got some images that are kept over here, maybe some files, maybe some JavaScript files over here. So it kind of like splits it up so that your browser can go away, get all this stuff, bring it back more or less at the same time. That's how a CDN works. And so that also can be really impactful sometimes. Image compression. So images are probably the most common reason why some pages are slow loading, and I think the number one culprit here is these things. So people taking photos on their phone, on their smartphone, and then uploading directly to their website. Now, the problem with that is that these images that your phone camera captures, they tend to be really big, like megabytes in size. Your browser, the web browser, it takes a lot longer to process those, and those images, they don't need to be that big. So a good hosting environment, a good website setup should automatically compress these images when they're uploaded to your site. So like with some of the tools we use, I get images from clients all the time that they want added to their website, we'll run them through a compression, and usually they're about like 90 to 95% smaller, which is a really big difference. So if you've got a good hosting environment, if you've got a good site care plan, a lot of these things should be in place so that anytime you do upload images, then you're not weighing down your site with a lot of heavy content. So I think you should look for a vendor who monitors uptime, okay, and responds proactively if there are any outages. So if your site goes down, what you don't want is to get a phone call from a patient say, "Hey, I'm trying to book my appointment or change my appointment, but your website's crashed," right? It's embarrassing. It's a bad look. So any vendor should have in place some sort of like monitoring system. So what we do is we've got a service that pings your site every 10 minutes to check that it's still online. And if it's down for some reason, then we get notified by an email, and then we can actively look into why that's the case. So sometimes it's nothing to do with the server environment that we provide, but it might be something that's upstream a little bit. Maybe something around your domain registrar. Like if you used Cloudflare, that sometimes can be a bit problematic at times. So the key point here is that there should be some sort of monitoring in place so that you can proactively look into these things. So we had an example recently where a client was on their website was attacked by what they call a DDoS, a distributed denial of service. It might not even have been their website. Well, it could have been another website on the server. But what that means is it's like a lot of people trying to access the resource at the same time. So that could be for nefarious reasons, or it could be just simply because something's gone viral and they're suddenly very popular. So when that happened anyway, so we got a notification. I was able to look into it, and I was able to see, okay, yeah, so there's a DDoS attack going on. So the hosting, the hosting provider is taking action to mitigate that, and it should be resolved within the hour, and it was. So, and people are generally happy with that when they know the full story of what's going on. So I think you should be looking for a vendor who can provide helpful, prompt support when it's needed. I don't think that you should have to wait around for a day or a week to get a response. I have seen some clients who are using hosting from another vendor, and they say, look, our guy's gone away for a week's vacation and we can't contact him. Well, I mean, everyone needs to take holidays. I get that, but it's not an ideal situation for you to be in for your business. And I think the last point here is, I think it's good if you can get a vendor, someone who's offering a hosting and site care plan, somebody who stays abreast of the latest technology news and keep you informed about that where it matters. So back in that episode a couple of weeks ago, where I talked about choosing, I think it was that one, where I talked about choosing a website platform. I mentioned that one of the reasons WordPress is a great choice is because you can easily migrate from one environment to another. If you're on one hosting provider and things are not working out, you can easily migrate to another. So we had one client who was with a hosting provider called WP Engine, and so I won't get into the details too much, but there's some legal battle going on between that company, a WP Engine, and the WordPress themselves. I think they're actually Automatic. There's the company who's sort of like one of the leading organizers of the WordPress project. and there was some conflict going on about use of the name or the copyright of the name WordPress. Anyway, so the outcome of that conflict was that a lot of the automatic software updates were no longer happening with WP Engine. They're effectively banned from the WordPress plugin repository. And so, because I knew what was happening, because I understood the issues involved, I was able to talk with our client and say, look, this might be ongoing for some time. I don't think it's going to be resolved soon. So, if I were you, I would consider migrating to a different host, which is what we did, and they're happy as Larry now. That legal battle's still ongoing. So I just think it helps if you've got somebody who can give you a heads up on these things and give you some actual advice grounded in knowledge of the latest issues and news and trends. All right. So does anyone have any questions that you'd like to ask before we wrap up? If you do, now's a good time to put them in the comments. So I'm going to leave you with a final thought that your marketing is sabotaged by a website that you can't rely on or step away from. So so you've got businesses to run. The marketing itself is difficult enough without also having to roll up your sleeves and get into the minutiae of managing your website. So I think if you're hoping to scale your business, you should be able to delegate a lot of this stuff and have reliable partners who can manage all of this for you. So if you're looking to scale, then I think look into a hosting and site care vendor who ticks all or at least most of the boxes that I mentioned earlier. And so if you'd like to talk to me about a site care plan for your business, generally we do this for clients who we also offer a marketing package to. So you can get in contact through our website, which is opticsdigital.net. You can reach out to me through LinkedIn, direct message, or you can shoot me an email, paul@opticsdigital.net. All right. Well, I hope this has been helpful and informative, and hope you got something out of it. So leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And again, I think probably Sunday mornings are when I'm going to do these lives. But I'd like to get some feedback on whether this is a good time for you, or if some other time is better. If you'd like, if you are interested in joining in real time. All right. So thanks everyone for watching. Have a great Sunday. Bye for now.